The morning sun climbed slow over the sleepy town of Maple Ridge, brushing its golden fingers across rooftops, old fences, and cracked roads that had seen more years than people cared to count. And in that quiet, something began to stir. Not the sound of birds or traffic, but the deep thunder of engines that shattered the silence like a storm breaking through still water. The kind of sound that made curtains shift and eyes peek out from behind them. The kind of sound that carried both fear and fascination. They came rolling in, a line of black and chrome, the air heavy with gasoline and purpose, and leading them was Rex Malone, a man whose story was written in the scars that crossed his face like lightning strikes. Once a name whispered in fear, now a legend that no one could quite define. He was the man who had walked away from violence, but never from justice. A man who had seen too much of both cruelty and kindness to mistake one for the other. That day, the engines growled to a stop outside the old diner at the edge of town, the same diner where the smell of burnt coffee mixed with the scent of tired dreams. Inside, Mara wiped down a counter that never stayed clean, her hands trembling slightly each time the manager's voice snapped from behind her, cutting through the room like a whip. She smiled anyway because that's what you did when you had nowhere else to go. And when Rex pushed open that creaking door, the bell above it chimed softly, as if announcing the beginning of something no one could have predicted. He stepped inside with that slow, steady walk of a man who didn't need to prove anything anymore. Yet his presence spoke louder than words. The other bikers filled the booths, their laughter low, but their leader said nothing. His eyes met Mara's, and in that one look, 1,000 unspoken things passed between them. Pain recognized pain, strength recognized survival. He saw the faint bruise she tried to hide, saw the way she flinched when her manager's shadow passed too close, and in that moment, the past he'd tried to bury clawed its way back. He had once failed to save someone like her, someone who needed just one person to stand up, and that memory had burned in him for years, like an unhealed wound. The lunch crowd came and went. The sun rose high and began to fall again, but Rex stayed long after his coffee had gone cold. He watched Mara drop a tray when the manager's hand brushed her shoulder too roughly, saw her whisper an apology she didn't owe, and something in him snapped. Not in rage, but in resolve. That night, under the low hum of the garage lights, he sat with his brothers, men who had followed him through wars of the heart and street alike, and told them the story of what he'd seen. No one interrupted, no one laughed. They knew the look in his eyes. It was the same look he'd had years ago before they'd turned their bikes toward something righteous. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we ride for her." Morning came gray and cold, the kind that promises change. And when Mara came into work, she froze at the sight of the motorcycles already lined up outside like soldiers at rest. Rex sat at the counter again, his expression calm, his coffee untouched. When she asked if everything was okay, he only said, "Not yet." Then the manager came out, his voice cutting through the air with the same cruelty as always, mocking her trembling hands, calling her worthless in front of customers who pretended not to hear. But this time Rex stood up. The air shifted, thickened. The laughter died. The bikers turned in unison, their leather creaking like armor, and for the first time, the man who had spent years feeding on fear suddenly tasted his own. Rex didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice was low, steady, and the truth in it made the room go still. "You think strength is in hurting someone who can't fight back?" he said. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." The manager tried to smirk, to throw another insult, but the sound died in his throat as Rex took a step closer. "You'll walk out that door," Rex said, "and you won't come back. Not tomorrow, not ever." The man's defiance melted, replaced by something raw and small, and when he finally left, slamming the door behind him, the sound didn't break the silence. It sealed it. Mara stood frozen, her eyes wide, tears brimming but not yet falling, and the room held its breath. Then she whispered, "Thank you," so quietly it was almost lost in the hum of the old fridge, but Rex heard it. He nodded once and said, "You don't owe me anything. You just start again." The applause that followed came slow, hesitant, like people remembering how to feel shame and then pride. One by one, the townsfolk who had always looked away found themselves clapping, not for Rex, but for what he'd reminded them they'd forgotten: courage. That night, the story spread faster than the engines that carried it, through diners and bars and gas stations, until the name Rex Malone meant something new. He wasn't just the man on the Harley. He was the man who reminded Maple Ridge that silence can be violence and that kindness sometimes roars instead of whispers. Mara left the diner soon after, finding a small cafe on the far side of town where the owner smiled instead of shouted. She found laughter again, small but real. And sometimes when the morning rush slowed, she'd glance out the window and see that familiar glint of chrome on the horizon, the bikes rolling by in a formation that looked almost protective. She'd wave and Rex would raise a hand in return, a promise, unspoken but understood. Weeks turned to months, and what began as one act became a movement. Rex's club, once known for chaos, began organizing charity rides, battered women's shelters, children's hospitals, disaster relief runs. The same people who used to cross the street to avoid them now waited on sidewalks just to wave as they passed. Mara joined them sometimes, riding in the support van, handing out meals, her laughter louder now, her confidence unbroken. She wasn't the frightened waitress anymore. She was part of something that grew out of pain and became purpose. Rex never sought thanks. He never gave speeches. His actions spoke for him, louder than the engines ever could. One evening, a local reporter asked him why he did it. What made him change? Rex looked at the sunset bleeding across the road and said simply, "Because someone should have stood up for her. I didn't then, I will now." That quote became the heartbeat of Maple Ridge. Printed on flyers, painted on murals, shared across social media until the story went far beyond the town, viral, global, inspiring others who thought they were too broken to make a difference. And yet, in all the attention, Rex stayed the same. He still rode the same bike, still stopped by that old diner, now under new ownership, where Mara sometimes volunteered, teaching young waitresses how to stand tall and speak up. The town that once whispered his name in fear now spoke it with respect. Children waved when he passed. Old men who once muttered "troublemaker" now nodded with quiet pride. The transformation wasn't just his, it was everyone's. The people learned that real change doesn't come from speeches or politics. It comes from moments of raw humanity, from the courage to care when it's easier not to. One night, long after the last customer had left the cafe, Mara sat outside on the bench. The stars spread wide like forgiveness overhead. She thought about that first day, about the sound of engines breaking silence, and how something that once scared her had saved her instead. She heard that sound again in the distance, softer now, familiar. The bikes approached, their lights cutting through the dark like hope. Rex slowed as he passed, giving her that same nod, the kind that said everything words never could. She smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who's finally free, and whispered to herself, "Kindness doesn't always come gentle. Sometimes it rides in on two wheels." In the following years, Maple Ridge became known as the town that healed. People came from neighboring cities to see the murals painted on old walls, a woman standing tall beside a biker with angel wings made of chrome. The diner was renamed Second Chances. Mara managed it now, her laughter filling the air like sunlight, and above the counter hung a small plaque that read, "When kindness spoke louder than fear." Rex came by rarely now, letting others take the lead, but every time he did, she'd pour him coffee without asking and say, "Still black, right?" He'd nod, take a sip, and smile. The faint kind of smile that hides stories behind it. What he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that she'd saved him too. Because kindness is never one-sided. It flows both ways, healing both the giver and the receiver. And so, as the years rolled on, the roar of engines became a symbol not of rebellion, but of redemption. The legend of Rex Malone wasn't about a biker who scared a bully out of town. It was about a man who proved that no one is too broken to choose goodness. And every time the engines echoed down the road, the people of Maple Ridge remembered that power isn't in fists or fear. It's in the courage to care. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion is the loudest sound in a world full of noise, take a moment to share it. Because somewhere, someone is waiting for a sign that kindness still exists. Let them find it here in this story, in this moment, in the sound of engines roaring not for destruction, but for hope. This is Kindness Corner, reminding you that even the roughest roads can lead to redemption. And sometimes, the strongest hearts beat beneath leather and steel. So tell us in the comments, do you believe even the toughest people can have the softest hearts? Because in Maple Ridge, they already found the answer.